Morning, everybody. Matt, coming through all right?
Yep, sounds great.
Great. Well, basically, I'm gonna jump right in. The basis of what I want to show you is essentially how to get something from the very beginning. I know every time I learn a new software package, you open the toolbar, you look at the thing, and there's all this stuff staring you in the face, and you're like, okay, where do I start? Well, I'm going to try and show you how you start from the very basic, you know, kind of put your training wheels on and go for it kind of point of view. Basically, this object, I'm going to start with two things. I'm going to start with, obviously, an imported sketch, and in this case, I'm assuming that the client has given me a single, very loose kind of gestural sketch and said, okay, go. This is a really common scenario for my business in the fact that I am a designer, I'm trained as a designer, and so when I'm building models, a lot of the other designers that I work with assume that I'm going to be able to make some aesthetic judgments in 3D on the fly to capture the intent. So it's really common for me to get kind of really loose, really gestural sketches, and then, you know, some hand waving and some, you know, go for it, make it look great, and go from there. So that's essentially what I'm starting with. I'm assuming that I'm only getting a side view sketch. I'm not getting any other views, and it's going to be up to me to make the judgments in 3D and design this on the fly. Fortunately, T-splines, the way that it works, is super conducive to this kind of workflow where you're making your aesthetic calls in 3D and designing on the fly. For me, this is a big advantage because to do this object in NURBS, you know, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, but as far as being able to make adjustments on the fly and do things like that where, you know, you can evaluate the surface in real time and mess with it to get it to how you want it to look is sometimes a little bit difficult or a little bit time consuming, and making changes and stuff like that obviously requires some rebuild. So let's talk a little bit about how T-splines works. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, basically T-splines is essentially two models. There's a cubic polygon model, which we call box mode, and then there's the T-splines sub-D surface, which is a smooth interpolation of that box model. And the best way that I can explain that is if I take a Rhino circle, and this is a degree 1 curve, and I turn the points on. Notice how the points are arranged in a box, and the circle is an interpolation between those individual points. If I grab a point and move it, then the circle updates. Now, obviously, this is a degree 1 circle, so I'm going to have some issues with tangency and things like that at the points. But I think that illustrates the point where, consequently, the same thing in a T-spline surface, if I do this, is if I start with a cubic shape and I thicken this a little bit, you'll see that in smooth mode I get a sphere. In box mode it's a square. So it's a very similar kind of concept. If I modify the points of the square, obviously the points of the circle or the sphere are going to modify as well. So there's a kind of lockstep relationship between the cubic model and the smooth mode. So with that in mind, let's jump right in. Basically what I'm going to do when I start this model is I'm going to evaluate kind of where the main transitional features are. Obviously this handle is going to have a slightly tubular shape, so there's going to be a break line in here. This surface here is going to be kind of a wide, tapering, iron-shaped surface. It's going to kind of have a little bit of curvature from the top to the bottom. there's obviously an undercut here and then a transition between the two of those. I've laid out some curves to kind of illustrate where the main features of this object are. And if you notice, I'm kind of just loosely following the sketch. So let's jump in and start building. The very first tool that I'm going to use, and we're only going to use 3, 4, 5 tools here, is the append face. This is a very basic tool where if you're clicking 4 points to place your first square. And keep in mind, we're going to build off of squares here. By default, we're starting in smooth mode. I actually want to work in box mode, so with the heads-up display on, which I get by hitting the control and the space bar, turns that on and off. I'm going to just hit the tab key, and that's going to switch me into box mode so that I can build this out of squares. The hotkeys for the selection tools are the A tool to get verts, and if you watch up here this will change. The S tool for edges, D for faces, and F for objects. There's the manipulator up here. You can also get this by clicking through, if you click up here in the heads-up display. And then the other one is the manipulators, and the Q tool hides them. The T translates, if I pick an edge here to start with so you can see it. The Q tool hides it. The W tool makes for translating, for moving things. The E key brings up the rotator. The R key brings up the scale. And the T key allows you to snap the manipulator to a different location. So that's kind of the basics of how the heads-up display works, and this concept of being able to flip through the manipulators really quick with hotkeys is really nice because it allows us to do all of this with just a handful of tools. Another feature of the manipulators are if you hold down the Alt key and select an edge or a face or an object and drag the edge, I get another square. If I do that again, Alt drag, I get another square. So what that allows me to do is to lay out something really quickly by just coming through here and grabbing this disk. If I grab the arrow, I'm constrained only in the X. Consequently, if I grab the green, I'm only in the Y. If I grab the disk, I'm constrained to the construction plane, but I can move it around in a couple of different directions. So I'm going to lay this out thinking about where my transitional features are, and notice the edge of this lines up with the edge of my handle, and you'll see why in just a little bit. So I'm going to Alt-click this disk and drag out a box, Alt-click again, drag out another box, and I'm going to stop at the bottom of my handle. I'm going to Alt-click again, and I'm going to stop in approximately the center of my handle. I'm going to Alt-click again, drag to the front, Alt-click again, and we'll finish this up. Notice how I kind of drag these along to match the approximate curve here. Well, I missed on the bottom, so I'm going to switch to the points mode by hitting the A key, and I'm going to just adjust these really quickly. Now, I'm not Alt-clicking here because I don't want to copy any geometry. I'm just using the manipulator as is to get where I want. So I'm going to adjust these quickly so that I've got an approximate layout for my iron. So if I go up to the perspective view and just spin this real quick, notice we're dead flat, and that's kind of how we're going to work on this. There's certainly a bunch of different ways to lay something out, but again, I wanted to show everybody the very basics of how you can do stuff if you only have a handle on a couple of tools. So let's add the handle in here. I'm going to start by laying out this section. Again, I'm going to go to my translate manipulator, and I'm going to Alt-drag in the C-plane, and I'm going to add some geometry in here, hit the A key to bring my points back, and I'm going to adjust this quickly to kind of fit in here. I'm going to go back to my edge mode, Alt-drag out my handle, I'm going to get one more because I'm going to use that to close it up. Now, to attach these, I'm going to get my points here and allow me to exercise my inner designer geek here a little bit just to adjust these curves. I'm looking for kind of a logical layout. Stuff should kind of flow and make sense, and you know, shouldn't have big crossing surfaces or anything crazy like that. So I need to connect this edge here to this edge here. And the way to do that, if I go to points mode, is I can weld these. And the weld tool has a cool interface trick. The weld key, hotkey, is the Z key. So if I pick a point, hit the Z key, and then pick another point, my first point jumps to my second. The way the interface is written, if I pick this point, hit the Z key, and pick this one, the first one jumps to the second. If I pick both and hit the Z key, they average. In this case, I want to move the first one to the second, so I'm going to pick the point, hit the Z, hit the second. Same thing up here. Pick the point, hit Z, go to the second, and notice they jump together. Another quick adjustment just for flow purposes to kind of make sure that this makes sense. And you can see how this is starting to lay out. So I need to build the top part of my handle. I'm going to go back to edge selection, and I'm going to pick all of these edges. I'm going to alt drag my C-plane disk here, and I'm going to add my edges. Go back to points mode with the A key. Again, drag this disk. Now I've lost count here, but I think we've only used 2 tools so far. 3 tools if you count weld. I'm going to weld this one to this one. Pick, hit the Z key, pick here. Go back to my translator. Kind of get my flow lined up a little bit here so that things kind of make sense. Okay, I think everybody's kind of got the picture there as far as laying stuff out. And again, this is all off the translator, just using the Alt key. So another interface thing that used to drive me nuts when I first started, until Matt explained it to me and I realized how cool it was, was every time I try to hit a hotkey down here with the heads-up display enabled, it was working on the T-splines hotkeys and not the Rhino hotkeys. I have all my views set up on Rhino hotkeys, and I need to be able to use those while I'm in T-splines. So if I need to switch to perspective mode and my cursor is down here in the screen with the heads-up display on, if I hit the P key and hit enter, it's changing my selection mode here because there's a hotkey for that. So what I'm going to do is, instead of that, I'm going to move my cursor up to the command line, then hit the P key, and that brings me into the perspective window. So anytime I want to use a Rhino hotkey with the heads-up display on, just move your cursor to the command line. It temporarily disables the heads-up display and allows you to access your Rhino commands. Best of both worlds. So what I'm going to do now is I need to get some volume because I'm dead flat. So I'm going to switch to face mode by hitting the D key. I'm going to select all my faces. My translator is still active, and I'm going to alt drag the Y handle to give me some thickness here. And I'm going to just pull it all the way out to match my base plate, assuming that's something that I was given by an engineer or something else like that to work from. Now notice what happened is since I extruded the face, it put a bottom on it, it put a back on it, put a top on it. It did not put a back on it, which is actually what I want because I'm going to apply symmetry to this at a later date. At this point, I don't want a bottom, though, because I'm going to continue to add more geometry in the bottom to get my transition. So I'm going to, in face mode, I'm just going to pick these, and I'm going to just delete them. So now I've got an open bottom and an open back, and it's time to get busy and start shaping this thing up. So I'm going to go back to edge mode, And I'm going to just start dragging this thing around to get my forms back to kind of where I want it. Again, you know, there's nothing complicated here. I'm just using the translate and the alt drag in order to get some geometry. So I'm going to start yanking this thing around, and it's going to be fairly ugly for just a second, but we have all sorts of flexibility here to de-uglify it at a later point. And my edge selection has kind of only taken me so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to point mode here, and let's shape up the bottom. So I'm going to go to the bottom view, again moving my cursor to the top so I can use my hotkeys in Rhino. And I'm going to just start picking some points, and I'm just going to quickly drag these to where they need to be. Again, nothing magical, just using the transform key. And go back to my perspective view. Let's move this guy. Let's move these two. So we're starting to get a little bit more iron-ish shape. And this handle is still massively wide, so let's go adjust that real quickly. Again, just pick and move. That's all we're doing. All right, at this point, we have a chunky approximation of box model. If I hit the tab key, make sure your heads-up display is enabled with the control spacebar. If I hit the tab key, we're going to do a smooth toggle, and you can see that that box model then gets interpolated into a smooth, curvature continuous shape. I have the Oxpecker plugin installed on this machine, which is it's basically an environmental mapping shader. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to assign this here so that you can see this a little bit shinier, because I know kids like shiny. All right, so you can see that we have really nice highlights going on here. This also puts us in a great position to, actually I'm going to hide this toolbar for now because I don't need it because I'm just working off the hotkeys now. You can see we have great highlights, really great flow, great transition. And at this point, I can come in here really quickly and start designing this thing on the fly in 3D. I'm going to hit the A key, which is going to bring up my verts, my translator, and again, I'm just going to drag. I'm going to adjust this so that it starts to feel right. Getting some really sweet looking highlights in there. I'm going to go to my edge mode. And notice when I pick an edge, you know, the model adjusts smoothly so that everything makes sense and does what you'd think it should do. I'm going to thin up the bottom of this handle a little bit. Maybe not this one. Gorgeous transitions. Getting stuff like that would be tough in NURBS. It could be done, but not like this. Bring my verts back up. I think I'm going to move this back out a little bit. All right. I always run the risk of dorking out on this stuff from an aesthetic point of view, but you can see that we have some really nice, smooth, beautiful transitions going on. So let's get busy with the bottom part of this. Actually, let's take a peek and just see how I'm doing with my sketch. So I'm going to hide the shader for a little bit, and I'm fairly close. Notice there's a little tuck in here that I'm missing, and I may be able to get that by dragging this stuff around a little bit, but it looks like I don't quite have enough geometry in there to do what I need it to do. So I'm going to adjust this really quickly. I think everybody gets the point. I need a little bit more geometry in here in order to make this transition happen and this transition happen. So I'm going to go back to my toolbar here. I'm going to add one more tool, which is the insert point. I'm going to pick this, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball where this needs to go. And I'm going to just pick a path. I'm going to go from here to here to here to here. And then I'm going to right-click Accept. The model will update with the new geometry. If I go back to my verts, now I have a lot more control because I have a little bit more geometry, and I can update it to match what I wanted it to do. Oh, that laid in there and made me look like I really know what I'm doing, doesn't it? Great. Okay. So at this point, come back and take a quick peek. Just make sure everything looks good. We've got very kind of irony shapes. Straighten that out a little bit. Again, you can see the flexibility here and how easy it is to kind of adjust it and make decisions on the fly. So let's switch back to box mode and add the final transition, and we'll tune it up a little bit and then get some symmetry involved. So with the heads-up display, make sure that's enabled. Hit the Tab key, switches me back to box mode. I'm going to go back into my front view using my Rhino hotkey by hovering over the command bar. I'm going to pick the edges. If I double-click my edge, it gives me the whole edge, which is what I want. Back to the front view. Again, exact same thing we did before. I'm going to Alt-drag. This time I'm going to drag just a little bit because I want a tight transition here, and so I'm going to add some geometry, add some extra boxes in there to do that. I'm going to drag out again. This I'm going to adjust to get the flow of this kind of sweep under spot. I'm going to bring these guys up a hair. Kind of see where I'm going with this? Uh-oh, looks like I have a second edge here. We don't want that. All right. One of the great things about me doing demos is I make mistakes. And I know when I was learning software, I would make a mistake after watching a demo and it wouldn't work and it would drive me nuts. What happens here is I have two edges that are extruded and they're laying on top of each other. That's going to cause problems down the line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this entire model with verts mode. I'm going to hit the Z key. That welds any coincident points, which gets rid of that additional edge. If you run into this, and it's really common, I do this all the time, obviously, because I just did it live in front of 300 people. All you need to do is select the whole model and weld the verts, and you're back in business. So now that we fixed that one little mistake, I'm going to go back to my edge mode. I'm going to double click this. Actually, I'm going to pick them individually. Grab my edges. I'm going to Alt drag again. And then maybe one more. Go back to edge mode. I'm going to pick these guys. I'm going to hit the E key, which is the rotate manipulator. I'm going to hit the T key and then snap to this point. So it allows me to change the pivot point on where the manipulator is. I'm going to hit the R key, which brings up my scale manipulator, and scale these in a bit. And then I'm going to adjust these. Again, I'm going to hit the E key, the T to change the pivot point. I'm going to rotate these guys up a little bit. Go back to my points. Let me get up to perspective view so I can see where I'm going here. And I'm going to go back to the W key, which is my move manipulator. Pick edges off the S key. I'm going to drag these in a little bit to get that transition going under. Pull this under. See how that's starting to come together? This guy, I'm going to scale this whole thing. I'm going to use the R key, hit the T key to change the transition point. I'm going to just scale these in a bit. Scale them back a bit. I'm just going to leave that tucked into the base plate here. Let me figure out where this guy is going. Let's see. Drag him up a little bit. Let me hide my iron plate just to make sure that I don't have any funky things going on here. Holy smokes, what is that? All right. That guy goes there. Let's see. I'm going to weld those two together. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to weld all of these together. All right, something's funky going on with this section down here, so I'm going to grab these faces and I'm going to get rid of them just by hitting the delete key. I think I got a little ahead of myself with extrude. So really easy to back up. Just pick and delete. And let's try that again. All right, go to my edge. I'm going to alt drag. I'm going to scale this so I don't get lost like I did last time. Use the T key to move the manipulator. Drag it in. Go back to the W key. Alt drag again. Move that up a little bit. Alt drag again. Go back to my R key. Scale it back out a little bit. Go to my W key. Alt drag again. Alrighty, that's a little cleaner layout. Let me bring my iron plate back up so I can make sure I got everything where it needs to be. Go to my verts. And I'm going to just adjust these. I'm going to scale these off of this point. Bring those up. Select these. Scale them up. We're getting close, guys. Hang in there with me. W key. Take a look and see how we look next to our sketch. Fairly good. Makes sense. Take a look in this view. Go back to edge mode. I'm going to drag these guys out just a hair. Bring all of these in just a little more. And if the computer gods are smiling on me today, we should be able to switch to smooth mode using the tab key. Boom. Oh, iron. All right. So without beating this up too much more, we're going to apply some symmetry to this. The first thing that you want to evaluate is to make sure that you're kind of running right down the center line, which everything appears to be doing. It is. If not, if you get in a situation, again, which it happens frequently, I tend to make every mistake known to man. If you get into a situation where your model is not laying on the center line, like it is here, if I go to apply symmetry, if I bring up my toolbar, again, I think now this is only the 5th tool we're using. If I apply symmetry to this in the Y by clicking it up here and hit OK, my model is going to have a tear in it. We don't want that. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to pick this vert, and using the Rhino, go up here, hover over the command bar, using the Rhino set point command, I'm going to snap all these. I'm going to snap this point to the Y, and this works if you have a bunch of points that are offline. Just use the Rhino snap point, snap it to the Y or whatever your center line is set up to. Go back up here, pick the symmetry. And Viola, we have a symmetrical model. There's a green line that runs right down the center of your model that indicates that there's a symmetry plane applied. You want that green line to go from edge to edge. If you see any breaks in that green line in your model, that's an indication that there's a vert or an edge that's not lying on the construction plane. You need to go back and adjust that, or it's going to cause you headaches in the future. So at this point, I have a full model. This is a watertight surface. If I convert this to NURBS, this will and cap it because the bottom's open. But if I were to convert this to NURBS and cap it, this is absolutely bomber, watertight, SLA, go to Pro E, go to SolidWorks, go home because your job is done today. Great, fantastic geometry. The other thing that you can do at this point is start evaluating your model in the round. And in this case, the handle is really still massively massive here. So I'm going to start pulling this in. Since I have symmetry applied, the model is going to update, say it with me, symmetrically. And it allows you to design something really on the fly, making your aesthetic judgments in real life, as opposed to building, trimming, filleting, cutting, blending, then taking a look at it, wash, rinse, repeat. I can do it here on the fly, and I can change and watch the highlights update and decide if that's what I want. If I need a little bit more flat in here because I have controls or something, it all happens right there. And again, this is like as simple as it gets, and we've created a really complex, really beautifully blended form. So let's just assume that we're happy with this. I'm going to spare you my designer geekery and getting into this too deeply to start modifying the forms, because I think I've beaten that to death here. And let's get back to Rhino, where especially people who are beginners to T-splines are going to be more comfortable. If I come up to my toolbars, there's a convert icon up here. If I right-click this convert icon, select T-spline surface to convert to Rhino surface. Well, this is the one I want. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to hit OK. And this is a Rhino polysurface now. If I bring up my properties, you can see it's listed as a polysurface. I am right back to being in Rhino. This is Rhino surfaces. If I hide my iron plate, I can look at this, run the cap command. No, that's not planar. Boo. Let me trim this and make it planar. Okay. NURBS, solid, closed. Do a check naked edges. No naked edges. This is bomber waterproof, watertight, ready to go to Pro E, SolidWorks, downstream, whatever you want to do with it. So now that I'm back into Rhino, I can then start doing things like bringing in buttons. I can project curves onto it. I can do all sorts of stuff like that. I can Boolean it. I can do all the great stuff like that. So if I hide this one, basically you can see where I went here with it. Bring up my plate again. All I did was project curves onto this, Boolean this out, separate this. You know, I Booleaned out a sphere here, Booleaned out a single plane here, added all that stuff, and T-splines base surface, Rhino detailing, a little bit of oxpecker shader, and you're done. And here we are 39 minutes later with a finished product. The other thing that I didn't mention before, because I wanted to beat on the basics of how to do this, but before we turn this into a Rhino surface, if I go back, while this is still a T-spline surface, this is something that I would absolutely positively love. Come on. If I grab this object, and it's a valid T-spline surface, and I go up here and I thicken this thing, I can offset this surface. Go in. I have my crease edges set to no. I can get wall thickness out of this. See that? If I crease the edges, it's a little easier to see. You can specify a thickness. I'm just dragging it to show you. This will offset and give you a wall thickness. So if you want to SLA this and make it into a shell, thicken it in T-splines before you convert it to NURBS. Now I convert it to NURBS, right-clicking the Convert button. NURBS polysurface with wall thickness. This is really, really helpful if you're trying to make housings or anything like that. If I bring up the objects and shut off my surface isoparams, you can clean the surface up and see a little bit. If I were to Boolean a giant cube out of this, you can see that it's got wall thickness in it. This will go to SLA machine all day long. So that's pretty much what I have for you. I think I'll turn back over to Matt now, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.